My in-laws held a family meeting to vote on giving away the inheritance I'd been saving for my daughter's college fund, and they scheduled it for a Tuesday night because they assumed I'd be too tired from my shift to fight back. They had absolutely no idea I'd already bought the practice they all worked for. I didn't scream. I didn't slam my coffee mug down on my mother-in-law's antique table. I just folded my hands in my lap, looked my father-in-law dead in the eye and said, "Fine," on one condition. By the time I finished laying out that condition, the satisfied little smiles around that table had curdled into something closer to panic, though none of them understood why yet. Growing up in my husband's family meant learning the unspoken rules fast. The Callaways of Charleston didn't just live well, they performed wellness. Like every dinner party was an audition for a magazine spread, nobody had asked them to be in. My father-in-law, Reginald, ran an orthodontic practice that had been in the family for 3 generations, and my mother-in-law, Patricia, ran the family's image with the precision of a woman who'd never once let her lipstick smudge in 40 years. I'm Adaeze, 34, an orthodontist myself, though you wouldn't know it from how Patricia introduced me at events. "This is Marcus's wife. She works with him at the practice," she'd say, like I hadn't graduated top of my class, like I hadn't been the one who modernized the entire billing system and brought in half their new patients through digital marketing I built from scratch on weekends. My husband Marcus was an only son who got treated like a crown prince, but it was his younger sister, Bethany, who got the real worship. Bethany was 29, had inherited Patricia's honey blonde highlights, and an absolute genius for never once having to face a consequence in her entire life. Whatever Bethany broke, the family quietly swept up and called it a rough patch. Whatever I built, they called just doing your job. The clearest proof of that double standard sat in my in-laws' guest room every single night. My niece and nephew, Ruby and Theo, had been living there for going on 2 years, because Bethany had decided motherhood was getting in the way of finding herself with a man she'd met at a wellness retreat in Sedona. Patricia and Reginald raised those kids while publicly praising Bethany's courage to prioritize her healing journey, conveniently ignoring that they were the ones doing every school drop-off and missed bedtime. That particular Sunday dinner was peak Callaway theater. Marcus and I showed up early to help set the table, only to get gently shooed out of the kitchen so Patricia could personally arrange the charcuterie before Bethany's grand entrance. I was 8 months pregnant, my ankles swollen past recognition, standing by the bay window while Marcus rubbed slow circles on my lower back. We watched Bethany breeze through the front door 40 minutes late, draped over the arm of her boyfriend, Tobias. Tobias was 33, described himself unironically as a luxury real estate visionary, and had never, as far as anyone could tell, actually closed a single sale. He talked a big game about flipping waterfront properties downtown, but what he was really doing was living entirely off whatever cash Bethany could pry out of her parents. The second Tobias and Bethany walked in, the whole house rearranged itself around them. Patricia rushed forward and practically elbowed past my pregnant belly to wrap Bethany in a hug like she'd just returned from war. Reginald, who'd barely managed a nod at Marcus all afternoon, pumped Tobias's hand enthusiastically and poured him a glass of his good bourbon. Marcus and I got seated at the far end of the dining table, which by now I understood was just where they kept the help. Through the appetizer course, Tobias dominated the conversation completely. When Reginald asked an innocent question about property taxes, Marcus, who actually ran the financial side of a thriving medical practice, tried to answer it. Tobias cut him off before he finished his first sentence. "Honestly, the whole tax system downtown is rigged to keep regular people out," Tobias announced, waving a shrimp fork around like a conductor's baton. "Bethany and I are looking at this gorgeous fixer-upper near the harbor. Total game changer. We just need to get our financing lined up before some hedge fund snatches it." Bethany rested her head on his shoulder, flashing her manicure toward our in-laws. "Tobias is just so visionary about this stuff," she cooed. "We're building something real together. The only problem is we're so cash-strapped right now from the market being so competitive." Patricia clasped her hands together, eyes practically glowing. "Oh, sweetheart, that's exactly what your father and I were just talking about. You two deserve a real foundation to build your future on." I kept my eyes on my plate, cutting my chicken into precise little squares because I already knew where this was heading. I'd spent 13 years funding Bethany's fresh starts, but even I didn't see the next part coming. Reginald tapped his fork against his wine glass, the sharp ring slicing through the table chatter. He stood, buttoned his blazer, and beamed down at Bethany and Tobias the way he usually only beamed at his own reflection in the practice's lobby mirror. "Your mother and I have been talking," he began, his voice booming like he was addressing a banquet hall instead of 6 people around a table. We look at Bethany, and we see a young woman finally finding her footing, ready to build something lasting with a partner who understands real opportunity when he sees it. We know breaking into property right now requires capital, and a family's first job is to support its own. So we've decided we're releasing the $85,000 from the Family Education Trust to cover the down payment on this property. The air went thin in my lungs. For one terrible second, the only sound in that dining room was the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. I stared at my father-in-law, trying to process what he'd just said. That family education trust was something Reginald had set up 4 years earlier, supposedly to fund whichever grandchildren needed help with school down the line, including the baby growing inside me right now. He'd framed it as a cornerstone of the family's legacy, something we'd all contribute to. But over those 4 years, I was the only one who'd ever deposited a single dollar. Every year-end bonus from the practice, every signing bonus I'd negotiated myself, every spare dollar from the continuing education seminars I taught on the side, all of it went straight into that account. It was my money, every cent of it. My in-laws had never put in a dime. Bethany certainly hadn't either. Hand flying to her chest. "Oh my God, Dad, Mom, are you serious? That is so unbelievably generous. I can't even." Toby's pumped his fist. "That's what I'm talking about. Real family backing real vision. You guys are not going to regret this." I put my hands flat on the table. My voice came out dangerously even. "Excuse me, but you can't give them that money." Every eye snapped to me. The smug little smiles dissolved into instant irritation. "What do you mean we can't, Adaeze?" Reginald demanded, his tone dropping an octave. "It's family money, and as the head of this family, I decide how it's used." "It's not family money," I said, keeping my voice level despite the heat rising in my chest. "I'm the only one who's ever put a cent into that account. Marcus and I have been saving that money for the baby's education. I'm 8 months pregnant. I am not funding a real estate fantasy for Tobias." Patricia scoffed, waving a manicured hand at me like she was swatting a fly. "Adaeze, please stop being so dramatic. You and Marcus both make excellent money at the practice. You'll be fine." "I'm fine because I work 60-hour weeks and save what I earn," I shot back. "Pregnancy isn't cheap either, in case anyone here has noticed." Bethany let out a wounded sigh, lips trembling into a practiced pout. "Why do you always have to do this, Adaeze? Why does everything have to be about you? I finally have a real shot at building something, and you can't stand to see me happy. You've always been so competitive with me." "Competitive with you?" I asked, my voice staying remarkably steady. "Bethany, you left Ruby and Theo with your parents 2 years ago. They're upstairs right now in their bedroom, being raised by people in their 60s because you decided motherhood was inconvenient. And now you want me to hand over $85,000 of my child's college fund so you can live near the harbor with a man who's never closed a single deal in his life." "Don't bring the kids into this," Patricia snapped, slamming her palm on the table. "Your sister-in-law went through a difficult season, and she's finally finding her footing. You should be lifting her up, not tearing her down." Tobias decided this was his moment. "Look, Adaeze, I get it, you're hormonal, stressed about the baby. But letting that kind of capital just sit stagnant in a savings account is basically losing money to inflation. By helping us leverage it into real estate, you're technically growing the whole family's portfolio." I turned and looked him up and down slowly. "Don't ever speak to me about my hormones or my capital again. You don't know the first thing about finance, and you certainly don't know the first thing about my family." Reginald shoved his chair back, the legs scraping the hardwood. "That's enough, Adaeze. I will not have you disrespecting a guest at my table. We fed you, we welcomed you into this family, and the one time your sister-in-law needs a real boost, you clench your fists and refuse to help. You're going to be a mother soon," Patricia added, shaking her head with theatrical disappointment. "What kind of example are you setting? A family shares its resources. We're releasing those funds to Bethany tomorrow morning. It's time you learn to sacrifice for the greater good." They sat there looking at me like I was the villain for refusing to let them gut my daughter's future to fund Bethany's delusions. They genuinely believed they held all the power. Because my name was on that account, and because I'd always been the quiet, agreeable one who eventually caved to keep the peace. They had no idea I'd stopped playing that particular game months ago. Tobias leaned forward, fingers steepled, wearing the exact expression of a man who'd never worked a real day in his life, but was certain he was the smartest person at the table. Adaeze, you're letting your emotions cloud your judgment. You're thinking from a place of scarcity. Real wealth is about understanding synergy, about backing the people who'll bring the highest return. Right now, Bethany and I are the growth stock, and you're just sitting on dead capital. I sat there and let this unemployed motivational quote machine lecture, a practicing orthodontist about capital, while wearing a blazer he'd undoubtedly charged to my father-in-law's card. Beside me, I felt Marcus reach his limit, his jaw tightening, his hand flexing against his knee. I dropped my own hands into my lap, out of sight, and dug my nails into my palms hard enough to leave little crescent marks. But then I remembered the document sitting in our home safe. I remembered the deed transferring into the name of the LLC Marcus and I exclusively controlled. If I let my anger win right now, if I stormed out, they'd never sign what I needed them to sign tomorrow. I needed their greed to blind them completely. I took a slow breath, reached for my water glass, and took a measured sip. I set it down without a sound, dabbed my mouth with my napkin, folded it neatly, and looked up. Fine, I said. The word landed quiet but absolute. Reginald blinked. What did you say? I said fine, I repeated, my voice empty of anything but calm. I'm not going to fight you on this. You're the head of the family, Dad. If you and Mom believe moving my money to Bethany and Tobias is what's best for this family, I won't stand in your way. Take the $85,000. The shift in the room was instant and almost violent in its relief. They didn't ask why I'd gone from defending my unborn child's future to surrendering in under 3 minutes. Their certainty in their own authority ran too deep to question a win. Reginald let out a booming laugh. Now that's what I'm talking about. I knew you'd see reason once you settled down. Patricia pressed a hand to her chest. Thank heavens. You're doing the right thing, Adaeze. When Bethany's settled into her new place, you'll understand why family has to lift each other up. Bethany squealed and threw her arms around Tobias's neck. Tobias pointed finger guns across the table at me. Good call, Adaeze Zoc. I'll send you a quarterly breakdown on the property appreciation. You'll be thanking me. I watched them toast with my father-in-law's bourbon, congratulating themselves on stripping a pregnant woman of her child's future without a second thought, completely unaware of the storm gathering directly above their heads. Later, rinsing serving dishes at the sink, Patricia drifted into the kitchen carrying an empty wine decanter. She bumped her hip against mine to get to the dishwasher without so much as an excuse me. Then she turned to me with a sugary smile, the one she only wore when she'd gotten exactly what she wanted. I'm so proud of you, Adaeze, she said. You're finally learning to be agreeable like your sister-in-law. It suits you so much better than that defensive attitude you carry around. I turned off the faucet. The sudden silence made the kitchen feel airless. Agreeable like Bethany, I repeated flatly. You mean compliant when it comes to funding her life? Patricia rolled her eyes. Don't ruin a good thing. Bethany has a light about her. People are drawn to her. You've always been so serious, so rigid. It pushes people away, rigid, because I've had to be the responsible one since I was 19. I shot back, grabbing a dish towel. Do you remember the scholarship I gave up so I could work double shifts and quietly pay off Bethany's $20,000 credit card debt before Dad found out, and it embarrassed him at the country club? I was 19 years old, her shopping trips to Miami. Patricia's arms crossed over her chest, the sweetness draining instantly. That's ancient history. We're a family. We protect each other. Your sister-in-law made a youthful mistake, and we handled it the way a respectable family does. A youthful mistake, I scoffed. Is that what we're calling Ruby and Theo now? Because last I checked, those two are asleep upstairs in the same bedroom they've slept in for 2 straight years, while their mother posted bikini photos from a retreat with a man who's never held a real job. She didn't abandon them, Patricia hissed, grabbing my arm, her nails digging in. She needed time to find herself. She's back now. She's building a real home for them. She's building it with my money, I said, holding her gaze. And she's only taking them back because the new place needs a family photo for Tobias's investor pitch. You're just jealous, Patricia snapped, releasing my arm. You've always been jealous of your sister-in-law. Just because you take after a more, let's say, practical side of the family, doesn't mean you have to carry that chip on your shoulder. Bethany has a certain presentation that opens doors. People invest in people who look a certain way, who carry themselves a certain way. It's reality, Adaeze. You have to work twice as hard to get half as far, and that's the unfortunate truth. But don't take your insecurities out on her just because she gets a little help to maintain the standard we expect from her. I stood there listening to the woman who'd watched me marry her son openly admit that, in her eyes, my only valid contribution to this family had always been my wallet, never my worth. "You're right, Mom," I said softly. "I have to work twice as hard, and because I work twice as hard, I understand exactly how contracts work. I understand exactly how leverage works." Things Bethany and Tobias couldn't begin to comprehend. Patricia's brow furrowed, confused by my sudden calm. "Just make sure Tobias signs whatever release forms the trust requires," I said, turning back the sink. "I won't authorize the transfer until everything's legally airtight. If you want the money for your golden girl, you play by my rules." She huffed and marched off, certain she'd won. I stood there a long moment, watching the suds spiral down the drain, my hands perfectly steady. I reached into my pocket and touched my phone, where the PDF of the release agreement was already waiting to send. The next morning, in my home office, sunlight cut clean lines across my desk. Marcus walked in with 2 mugs of tea, setting mine beside my keyboard. "They're taking it well, I assume," he said dryly. "Oh, they're thrilled," I said, eyes on the buzzing phone. "Dad just texted that standard banking procedures are an outdated relic invented to slow down real visionaries." Tobias clearly fed him that line. Marcus shook his head, pacing, his analytical brain shifting gears the way it did at the practice when a complicated case came in. "Let's review one more time," he said. "If your father tries to challenge this in court later, claiming we tricked him, this document is our only shield. It has to be flawless. I trust you. Walk me through it again. The trust requires dual signatures for any release over $50,000, which you insisted is on when you set it up. Your father can initiate a transfer, but it stays pending until you as co-trustees sign off. That's our failsafe." I nodded. "And the release contract, framed as a formalized gift acknowledgement," Marcus said, leaning over my shoulder, pointing at the screen. "Standard language, clean break, no future claims. Buried in Section 4 is the real teeth, a full waiver of any equitable claim to property held by you or any LLC in which you hold a controlling interest. Harborview Properties is an affiliated LLC," I said slowly. "Exactly. When your parents sign this to get Bethany her money, they're also signing away any future right to challenge Harborview's ownership of the practice building. The same building Reginald's been renting space in from us for the last 4 months, without realizing he sold the deed to cover his secret second mortgage." I leaned back, hand resting on my belly, feeling a small flutter against my palm. "I'm protecting your future, little one," I whispered to the quiet room. "No one's taking what's yours." That night, the family group chat lit up with my message. A polite, almost bureaucratic note explaining that the trust's compliance department, meaning me, required all parties to sign a standard liability release before the funds could move. Given the size of the transfer and the unregistered nature of Tobias's intended investment vehicle, I asked them to come by my house the next morning at 10. I added that I'd have coffee ready. The responses came in fast and furious, exactly as I expected. Indignation from Reginald, passive-aggressive sighing from Patricia, frantic worry from Bethany that the delay might cost her the property. I didn't answer any of it, I let them stew. The next morning, Bethany's first call came in around 9, her voice already cracking. "Adaeze, what is going on? Tobias is meeting the seller's agent in 20 minutes and the wire hasn't cleared. Dad said he already authorized it." "The trust flagged the transaction for review," I said, voice smooth and even. "Standard procedure for a transfer this size to an unregistered vehicle. I told everyone in the group chat last night. This is humiliating, Adaeze. Just click approve." "It's not my money to release without the documentation, Bethany. I'll have everything ready when you all come by at 10. She hung up on me. 40 minutes later, 4 car doors slammed outside my house in quick succession. I opened the door to find them huddled on my porch like a small, furious delegation. Reginald in front, chest puffed, Tobias beside him, trying to mirror the posture, Patricia and Bethany behind with their arms crossed. Nobody asked how the pregnancy was going. Reginald simply said, "Are we standing out here all day, or are you going to let us in to finish this?" I stepped back and let them in. They tracked wet shoes across my floor, without a second thought, and gathered around my dining table, refusing to sit, leaning forward like they were trying to physically intimidate the wood itself. Marcus brought the folder out and set it on the table without opening it. "The laptop stays closed until the paperwork's signed," he said. Reginald scanned the first page, lips moving. "This just says you're gifting the 85 to Bethany, and we can't hold you liable for anything that happens with Tobias's investment." "That's the protective clause," I said. "There's a reciprocal condition for releasing the funds." Adaeze read the second clause aloud, then barked out a laugh. Assets owned by you or your LLC. What assets, Adaeze? You've got a mortgage on this place and a 401k. You don't have a real estate portfolio. Patricia sighed, dropping her purse on the table. This is exactly her problem, Marcus. She's obsessed with sounding important. Let her have her little power trip so we can get Bethany her money and leave. Reginald didn't hesitate. He snatched the pen off the table and signed without reading the rest, eager to be the one dictating the room's pace. Patricia followed, scrawling her name with a pitying shake of her head, telling me I needed therapy. Bethany barely glanced at the page before scribbling hers, eyes locked on the closed laptop like a woman starving. I signed last, Mark witnessing beside me. He flipped the laptop open. I navigated to the pending transfer, hovered over the green button, looked up once at Bethany and clicked it. Tobias whooped, grabbed Bethany's hand, and they ran out the door without a goodbye. Reginald buttoned his blazer and told me I'd made this far more difficult than it needed to be. Patricia told me to enjoy my little house on the way out. The door slammed. The silence that followed felt like the first clean breath I'd taken in months. 3 weeks later, on closing day for the harbor property, Bethany stood in a glass conference room while her real estate agent's professional smile cracked at the edges. Tobias wasn't answering his phone. He'd never shown up. With trembling hands, Bethany logged into the joint crypto exchange account Tobias had set up for liquid capital management and found the balance sitting at exactly zero. The $85,000 had been routed to an offshore wallet 40 minutes after the signing at my dining table. His Instagram had been wiped clean. His number disconnected. That same week, Reginald discovered through his own broker that the practice building, the one he'd quietly used as collateral on a second mortgage to cover Bethany's prior debts without telling anyone, had been sold to a private buyer months earlier. The buyer was Harborview Properties LLC. He stood in his office, processing what his wife had just remembered out loud, the exact clause she'd scoffed at the night before. Harborview Properties is mine. They had signed away their right to fight it in exchange for cash that was already gone before the ink dried. They showed up at my door that evening in the rain, the same way they'd shown up that morning to demand my money, except now they were begging. Reginald asked me to sign the building back over so he could refinance and fix the mess. Patricia begged me to wire another $85,000 to save Bethany's reputation before the church gala in 3 weeks. I stood in my doorway, my hand resting on my belly, and let the silence answer for me. You're not begging your daughter-in-law, I finally said. You're begging your landlord. And I stopped owing you anything the second you signed that release. I handed Reginald a sealed envelope. 30 days to vacate the building. I closed the door and didn't open it again when they pounded on it for another 10 minutes in the rain. In the weeks that followed, the practice relocated to a strip mall lease. Reginald could barely afford after losing his malpractice insurance discount tied to the old address. Patricia's garden club membership quietly lapsed. Bethany took a job answering phones at a chiropractor's office 2 towns over, riding the bus because her car got repossessed. I filed for emergency guardianship of Ruby and Theo soon after, and when the court date came, nobody from the family bothered to show up to contest it. Now Ruby and Theo build pillow forts in my living room, while my daughter naps in my arms by the window, her tiny hand wrapped around my finger. Marcus comes in from work and kisses the top of her head before scooping Theo onto his shoulders. Nobody here gets ranked by how light their skin is or how much they can be useful for. I didn't destroy my husband's family. I just handed them a pen and let their own greed write the ending. I control my legacy now, and for the first time in my life, I control my peace.